momentum of the NCT movement. And it seems like, at least for me, being a new Southerner down here in the States, that you don't really hear too much about it.
Can you not? Sorry, I didn't hear that last part, Curtis.
You don't really hear anything about New Covenant theology, or at least as far as my limited experience goes down here in the South. I'm in South Carolina.
Right.
And I was wondering how to pick up maybe some momentum.
In South Carolina.
Well, I guess everywhere, but
yeah, Christopher. Excuse me, Curtis. Christopher, you have disappeared again.
Oh, I'm sorry. What I was trying to do was get the screen so that I didn't have to look at my own face.
Ah, well, there's nothing wrong with your face. If you've got a face like mine, you've got a problem. But your face is all right. My brother says I've got a face like a burst boot. So you're all right.
no, you're all right.
So Curtis, sorry, Christopher, did you hear what Curtis said? I'm assuming your audio was okay, right?
Are you talking? I'm sorry. Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I heard what Curtis was saying. Well, I'm in the same situation. Barely anyone up here in upstate New York knows anything about New Covenant theology. They've never heard that title before. Most of them.
Right. It's the same here, Curtis, where I am in northeast Pennsylvania. Down the south, you have someone like Fred Zaspel, and I think there's a couple of churches there. I don't know any of these guys. I couldn't even point out Fred Zaspel. I don't even know what the guy looks like. So yeah. I don't know anything. I don't know one living, breathing person who now clearly identifies with New Covenant theology. There was a guy, Jack Jeffries, and he lived up, but he's given up on it. So, yeah.
He's given up on NCT?
Yeah, he's given up, yeah.
Which direction did he go?
He went in the tired and battered direction, meaning he had expressed to us. There was a bunch of us who met with him for a couple of months, and he was exhausted with all the infighting and struggles that were in New Covenant theology at that time, which I wasn't part of. I didn't know anybody, and I wasn't part of it, so I have no idea. I knew what he was talking about, to some degree, but yeah, I can't really say.
I visited Promised Land State Park a few years back up in Pennsylvania, and I think he's from that area, correct? He's got a small church.
He's if you've ever heard of Scranton, he's kind of near that area.
Okay.
Which is he's about 30 miles from where I am. But he, up in this area, there's nothing. There's a lot of areas where there is no New Covenant theology witness. So you're not alone. I scrape the barrel with dispensational churches, moderate evangelical churches. There's nothing. And occasionally you get a Reformed Baptist. It's too far away they're too far away.
Right.
So it becomes, you have to make do with what you have. So I've ended up attending a church that is a Mennonite church, a Christian pacifist church. The guy is a decent preacher and a godly man, but you make do with what you have, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like for me, I just moved down to South Carolina about 6 months ago, and I actually went to like 9 or 10 churches before I found a church that even had a semblance of good preaching. A lot of older folks there, but a lot of the churches down here are very shallow in the sense where you're not getting what we would normally talk about. Which I understand. You know, there's a lot of believers in the churches that they're looking for encouragement from week to week. I get it. But a lot of traditional Christian churches down here, people I found they just go at a tradition. It's not like you know, I guess you would say you're evangelical or Reformed Baptist church where brothers and sisters are zealous for the word. It's more or less a lot of people down here just going at a traditional Southern particularities.
Right. Yeah. I can see why it's very difficult for you down there. Very difficult. Wow. Well, I would love to see New Covenant Theology churches spread everywhere, but I spoke to Christopher over the phone. I think I did anyway about this subject. Did we, Christopher? Did we kind of touch on this?
I'm sorry. On what subject specifically?
The New Covenant Theology spreading in terms of churches. I can't remember if it was you I spoke to or somebody else. Maybe it was Rennie Frey. I can't. Sorry, it's a bit of a blur to me.
Sorry.
But the New Covenant Theology model is, I think, predominantly a local church model.
Right.
And it's a bunch of independent guys doing their thing wherever they are in that church. And some of them are elders in the church, and some of them are, you know, just someone like myself. I don't have any teaching position or anything. I'm just a guy. So there's quite a few of us, and we don't have any clout. And so I get the impression it's a lot of that's being repeated throughout the country. But
Right.
not quite. I mean, you've got people like John Mergel, is it Mergel you say, and other guys who are actually teachers in the church. But I do suspect that even some of them, they're not actually leading the church. Like, I think Stuart Brogden teaches in his church, but it's not an NCT church.
Right.
There's very few that I can see NCT churches. I think that would be right. And I'm not too sure there's a great appetite to see that change. I might be wrong, but that's my impression.
I think the churches are struggling so much just to get guys in leadership that they'll take what they can get. If you know what I mean.
All right. Okay.
Who is KM?
That's
supposed to.
That's Kenneth
It's spelled
Mick.
wrong. It's supposed to have two ends in it. It's Kenneth Mick. Why doesn't my video show?
Kenneth Mick. Oh, Ken Mick. Okay. All right. How you doing,
Ken,
brother?
Kenneth, do you go by Kenneth or do you go by Ken?
I go by Ken. I go by whatever my family calls me. I'm usually Ken.
Okay. If you click on the bottom of your screen, there's a little video symbol. If you click that,
Yeah, I thought I had that on.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Let me try it again. I was on.
It might be a slight delay.
There you're going. I think you're going. There you are. There you are.
Yeah, you've had to do what I did.
I had animals to take care of, so I got behind a little bit. So there we go.
Oh, you got a farm? Ken, you got a farm?
No, we just have dog and cats.
Oh,
a chicken or two. We have 9 acres, but I was inside and they just get wild. We used to have a lot of chickens, but not anymore. The kids are gone. So I'm sorry I interrupted the talk there. I'll just be a listener.
No.
Great to see you, brother.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Well, my wife's at work. It's a good time to meet with other people.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, yeah, my wife's out with my daughter. Yeah. So we were talking, Curtis was asking the question if we can encourage New Covenant Theology churches, their growth, planting New Covenant Theology churches. Sorry, I have a habit of bending in here, I beg your pardon. And I was saying to him, the impression I get from the New Covenant Theology community is it's not like your other communities. It's very disparate. It's broken up. It's individuals. It's an elder in a church that is not a New Covenant Theology church, and they're just spread throughout the country. That's the impression I get.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see, Curtis, are you aiming to go into the pastorate?
Eventually, I feel if I'm kind of moved in that direction right now, being here for limited time, I've kind of been put in a teaching position for Sunday school, but I'm like the goldfish who's in the bag. They're still looking to let me out into the fish tank. But we'll see what the Lord does.
Oh, they've got an eye on you. You're being assessed. Is that it? Is that a formal thing?
No, I'm getting used to the saints over there and getting to know them. And the church I joined, while the preaching may be particularly decent, the leadership is disjointed. There's one pastor. There's two teachers, including myself. And the deacons there's about 2 deacons, but there's no real order as far as the church is concerned with maybe structural prayer nights, or I mean, it's just kind of, there's a basic bare minimum order, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's all too common in the area I am in as well. It's very common.
Well, Massachusetts has a number of New Covenant guys. Some of you guys might know Gary George. Do you know Gary George?
Doesn't he go on another New Covenant Theology site on Facebook?
Yes. He's been to the old Bunyan conference he used to go. He's a friend of mine. He's about an hour and 40 minutes away. So their church is rather structured, and it's New Covenant the whole way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and down in Pennsylvania, where my mother and father went, well, my father was New Covenant, but when they moved up, when their church folded, they went to a man by the name of Rodney Gray.
I don't know.
Right near where the Susquehanna River splits in two in Pennsylvania. He's very much New Covenant. Their church is. He's the only elder there right now. Up in our area, there's no. From Gary George's church over to us, I'm in Western Massachusetts. There are no New Covenant churches that are not the sovereign. And there might be, there's probably no New Covenant Sovereign Grace churches that I know of. Just my wife and I, because mine folded. We were one up in about a half an hour away from here. That's gone. So
I see.
Yeah, I go to a church that has the pastor is Calvinistic. I would call him new Calvinistic. It's a community church. He himself is Presbyterian. The other elder that got a job in Treasury Department, United States Treasury Department, he was definitely not New Covenant, but Doctrines of Grace. So there's nothing. We're starved up here. Like Chris's area.
That doesn't discount house churches, because how do you find a good house church anyway?
No, that's Dale Water. Dale, brother, are you there?
Yes.
I'm trying to fix something with my mic. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, we can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm going to try to plug in another microphone. Give me 1 second. All right. Am I audible?
Yes.
Perfect. All righty.
I can see the
there
top
you are.
of my head. Why is that?
Hey, brother. Howdy, y'all. How's it going?
I was going to ask you, Angus, if you could adjust your camera. Thank you.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I'm not very technologically gifted.
You're good now.
The Lord didn't bless me with that gift. Is that better?
Yes, thank you. Dale, how you doing?
Well, Chris, how about you?
Good.
Yeah, it's nice. hear some of you guys in the, not flesh, but spirit, tech, I don't know.
Amen.
Right,
Great to see you, Dale.
You as well.
Amen.
It's funny to, I've actually, John, I've heard you in a video before, but everyone else, I think, I've sort of just had to guess in my head what your voices sound like. So,
Yeah. I sound like Shrek. I look a bit like him as well, I've been told.
you know.
Shrek. Yeah. Yeah, we've been talking about the state of the New Covenant Theology churches, how many there are, and where we can. Curtis is looking for or asking about the potential of a New Covenant Theology church being planted in his, was it South Carolina, isn't it?
Yeah, South Carolina, and just kind of touching on or inquiring about somehow getting momentum for NCT.
Yes, great. That I'll tell you what, that's a brilliant. That's something that's close to my heart anyway.
Did any of you ever go to the Bunyan conference in Pennsylvania when John Reesing was around?
No.
Okay. They got together, a whole bunch of us, trying to come up with a new covenant, what do you call it? The confession of faith.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many varieties, it never went anywhere.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of those guys.
By nature, you can't nail down everything in a confession because it leaves room for other things. But
right.
The end times is one big thing. The whether the supernatural gifts of the Spirit are, open or not. Those are the two things that I noticed never allowed it to go very far.
Yeah, my perception has been that, at least for a while, NCT was just received or was conceptualized in a negative sense, as in, we don't believe these things.
Yes.
And the way you might get there exegetically could be somewhat different. And so I think that, that kind of causes trouble if you try to put those people in a room together. If the unity is based on a doctrinal point that you don't always get you the same way, that can be harder.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could kind of work off a 1646 or 1644 without being too specific, but just filling in some of the distinctives,
What distinctives do you mean?
You
mean like each individual church would fill in those distinctives? Is that what you mean?
No, almost like one plan of God centered in Christ Jesus, and kind of put that where you would kind of find it in the 1644 or 1646. Kind of use that just as a loose background. I don't know.
You mean like a less?
Why can't 6 or 7 points of New Covenant Theology be the confession?
Okay. I got a book for that.
Yeah.
Right. What is New Covenant Theology by Blake White?
Yeah. Do that one, and the one that Tom Nettles and Fred Zaspel had worked together. You just get the general principles and put them. You don't have to have it because a lot of the things you can pull over from other confessions.
Well, to be quite honest, there should be liberty within the NCT movement for people to have those differences,
And structure of the church as well. That would be another area that would cause issues with some churches. Some are more tight, some are more loose.
Leave it out.
Some believe in elders that are workers other places. Some allow elders that are only working in the church. And there's got to be that leeway, or there's not going to be confessional unity. There can be unity, but no confessional unity.
Well, that's as far as I can see, that's the rub right there. As soon as you use the term confessional, you're into detailed doctrine. By the nature of the case, a confession is a detailed statement. It's not just a summary.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem lies. That's why they could never unite in the confessional sense. And there's also the issue of what was never explored is the New Covenant Theology hermeneutic. And that's a major reason why there has never been any kind of unity. In fact, one of the major reasons why they did split was because John Riesinger was exploring the New Covenant Theology hermeneutic for the first time. And it led him down a non-premillennial path.
Of course.
That did not sit well with a bunch of different fellows. Sorry?
Well, I was just going to interject, and I would say the New Covenant Theology hermeneutic, shouldn't it just be the hermeneutic of the apostles, of Jesus and the apostles?
Well,
Both
Easy to say.
Yes.
Agreed, but there were some at that time who were dispensational, and
Right.
still are, and they haven't changed. But the idea of New Covenant theology as a hermeneutic is a different beast to New Covenant theology as a statement of doctrines, and it's led to all kinds of different points of view, to the point you have progressive covenantalism today that stepped outside of that original traditional broad umbrella approach. And that's all because of they're taking things in a different way. They've got a different hermeneutic.
Right.
Until that gets nailed, I do not think there will be, I don't think you're going to get the confessional side of things. You might get that 7-point thing that Blake White says. You might get that. But a deep confession, that's going to be really hard to achieve.
Well, those 7 things, couldn't they just be it? You don't have to be specific. If you believe those 7 that Blake White wrote, you are New Covenant.
Right. Well, if you think about what covenant theology is, you don't have to have a particular eschatological view to be considered a covenant theologian. Dispensational, you kind of do. But yeah. There's a lot of categories that are theoretically mix and match. Although I think people would obviously argue that their way of matching them is the most consistent. So,
of course,
yeah, but it's also hard because a lot of New Covenant guys are coming out of, well, whatever they come out of, it's very hard to kick some of the tangential pieces of it. So if you're coming out of a Presbyterian background, like you're almost just gonna be a more structured view of what church is. You're gonna be Amil almost just by default, and either you can over time come to a different conclusion or defend it in a different way than you did before, or you might sort of backtrack. And you think of even back to the Reformation. Zwingli was going in a good direction. Then he realized what that meant, so he changed his whole hermeneutic to get back to what he wanted to be. And that's he was not a worse man than any of us necessarily.
Yeah, that's an area. Another problem is the nature of, when I say problem, another fact I should say is the nature of New Covenant, the community itself. The first thing that struck me about the New Covenant theology community was that it was all broken into pieces. I observed that. I was New Covenant theology many years ago, but I observed it from the outside. And what I saw was it was broken up. There was no unity. There was none.
Right.
And it was all very small groupish. If there was unity, like on Facebook, etc., but there was no network of unity. And I'm not talking about a Presbyterian thing or a denomination. You had this group over there doing its thing, that group over there doing their thing, and everybody was doing their thing. And that to me seemed to be the bigger problem in terms of a unity. If you can't get that communication unity, then you're definitely not going to get the theological unity, because you can't get them in the same room to talk.
Which is interesting.
To talk, you're in with a chance.
If you think about it, I mean, if you're basically falling under the heading of NCT, there's got to be grace between us with some differences that we might hold. I mean, I mean, it's human nature. I get it. We're fallen and people are going to fracture and divide. But I went to a church when I lived in New York where one preacher was strictly historical pre-mill, and he had that, like, I would say, at least a progressive dispensational hermeneutic. And the other preacher was all mill. And they wouldn't get so specific they wouldn't tie the congregation down with specifics and try and divide people. But they spoke in such a way where those differences didn't matter.
Right. But that would traditionally, that wouldn't be identified then as, to use the model of NCT, it would not then be an NCT church, would it? It'd be more a broad, conservative, evangelical church that allows for NCT, progressive dispensationalism, and whatever else. That seems to be the way that seems to be the experience of some of the NCT community. They're in pretty conservative churches, but they are the NCT representative, and the other elder is something else, and then something else. I've seen that a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna. I was saying to Christopher back a while ago that I really would like to see the New Covenant Theology community do what we are doing just now, is communicate, is talk.
This may be a better way with so many people all over the United States.
This
may be the way to
big
do it.
issue. That's a big issue.
As I said, Gary George is the closest New Covenant church, an hour and 40 minutes away.
That's right.
Even when we were over here in Savoy, there weren't too many, and that church has been New Covenant since when we got married. So since 88, 87, but there was the distance in an older congregation, there was no way to fellowship. We went to Jamaica. They packed up stuff for Jamaica. My daughter and I went to Jamaica with his church, but you couldn't really have a lot of the church fellowship just because of physical distance. And also time, people working odd schedules, second shift worker, third shift workers.
Right.
Me working first shift. It's just no way to, but this kind of thing, you can meet even on large screen.
Yeah.
Instead of actually meeting in person, you're meeting, fellowshipping, and
Amen.
having your individual meals, whatever, why everyone else is.
Amen. No, I thank God that we are meeting right now. I'm really glad. It's been well overdue, and I would love to see Curtis's desire fulfilled. But I've thought for a long time, and excuse me for saying this, for years I've felt that until a group can commit itself to communicating, it will never grow together, and it will never plant churches together.
Yeah, but there are also some major issues between some of the church leaders that's going to cause issues for later for New Covenant, because not everybody follows the same leaders in the New Covenant group. For some, I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but that's you have your poles.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
churches have split. Another thing, so one New Covenant person's one, the other one, then you end up taking sides, that type of thing. That's got to be overcome.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have I could tell from some of you guys, from what you're saying, you have a broader approach, and I would have that same approach myself in terms of encouraging others to follow the NCT path. But even to get to that stage, that's difficult, because even that broad stage where we're all of one mind, that's very difficult to get to. Since, to give you an example, there is that theological conference over there in the East Coast in New England. I don't know.
Talking about the fellowship conference?
Is it the John Bunyan thing or something?
Well, no, it's not in the East Coast anymore. That died years and years ago. That's when we used to go.
No, well, it's a different one then that Terry Rayburn was asking us if.
Oh, that's the new Bunyan. Yeah, that is the Bunyan conference. That they do that through the PTI.
That's down in Tennessee, though.
Yeah.
Was it? Am I getting the wrong? Oh, for goodness sake!
No, it used to be in the East Coast years ago. Now it's down in Tennessee.
Ah, right, okay.
I'm bad enough at geography that I just heard East Coast and thought
Tennessee,
Tennessee.
Massachusetts, what's the difference? I mean, they're all the same place, right? Well, that's all when people say to me, yeah, well,
no, Gary's church had some, like he used to have Gary Long come in and come others at his own church, but that was just for evening meetings. That wasn't really a conference. It was just
so
people.
Here's my question, brother. My question is this. Where are all these leaders? Where are they?
Leading their own churches.
Exactly. They're all in their groups, which is fine, and they're doing their thing. But here's again, I come back to my basic conception. Why not a network of communication? Why do I know nothing about Gary Long? Is it Gary Long you call him?
Well, he's dead now, but yeah.
All right. So,
he had the
he had
some books, Definite Atonement, some other books, yeah.
We have 21st century technology, but we don't really, we're busy doing our stuff.
It's almost as if we had a digital Sounds of Grace that went out to all these guys and kind of spread, might help the situation.
There used to be an email list, the Sound of Grace list.
No.
Years and years ago. Mo Bergeron had that one.
I would love to see Fred Zaspel here meeting with us. Jeff.
Well, he's on Facebook. We could invite him.
All these guys, even if they're coming on 5 minutes every now and again, just that very simple step.
Once people know things. However, some of us are dual or triple employed too, so that's going to be an issue for the time.
Yeah.
Now, Angus, what do you think? What are you thinking about accomplishing by having people like Fred Zaspel on to talk? Like
it doesn't have to be Fred Zaspel, but it would people who are leaders of NCT-ish groups.
Yep.
They will help to stimulate the NCT communication into a proper, something coming close to a network. And it doesn't have to be a denomination. It doesn't have to be, you have to believe what I believe, etc., etc.
A fellowship group.
Yeah. Until we actually get these people under the same roof, to use that metaphor, I think we're going to be struggling to pull things together to help someone like Curtis plant an NCT church. I'd love to see him plant an NCT church, or become the head of the pastor or the elder of an NCT church. I'd love to see that. All of you who are thinking in that. I'm never going to be that guy, but I'd love to see it. And I say it. It's a mark of the New Covenant Theology community just now that you've got a lot of individual groups that are off by themselves and they don't even know.
And most of them are older men leading them now, like me, you, others. We're the old guys.
Yeah. So that's, yes, and that's a good perspective as well. I'd love to see the younger guys, but it's like they've got no springboard to spring off. There's nothing there.
Yeah, I've noticed that I think one of the things is that a lot of people don't, not that they even don't care, they just don't think in the terms of what New Covenant Theology is addressing. And so, if you go to the average American Christian, they're sort of by default dispensationalish, although they couldn't name the dispensations. They don't even know that that's a word. They think the three eschatologies are pre, mid, and post-trib. They think you think you baptize adults. The 10 Commandments are God's law. But either the Sabbath is Sunday now, or it's maybe not for today. But they're like, it's, there's not enough even thought on these things.
Right.
They don't see how that would affect things practically enough to say, oh, we need to be consistent with this, and this is how you really ought to be reading Scripture. And then on top of that, I think a lot of people are don't even see the dangers that it can go towards a lot, because even the Presbyterian groups. I was a member of attender of Presbyterian churches for 22 years. And, I had to search deep to even hear about, Calvinism or covenant theology or anything else. And whereas if, you go to, and I think NCT guys are also less obnoxious than other people. So, I don't think any of you guys are on TikTok, but I do some stuff on there. And there's actually this really, and this is on the bat, but there's this really big Torah observance movement. And, that will kill people. Like some of these guys are making the Galatians look, like great Christians. The Galatian heretics look good. And, so the cults are willing to just go out and, remove who they may, but get these really, erratic followers. And they're a small group that are able to thrive that way. NCT is, double, has two things against them, that they're willing to be decent people. And also a lot of people just aren't thinking on that spectrum. And most pastors and congregants aren't dealing with these Torah observers or extreme views that, a lot of these hermeneutics ultimately point to.
That's the Torah issue has been there for a while now. It's been there for a number of years.
Oh, yeah.
We're aware of it, but how do we as a New Covenant Theology fellowship or community, how do we deal with these things?
I mean, on some level, you can't deal with, what's not near you. I wouldn't just go write a letter about, some church in Idaho that I never, that I had to Google to see that their pastor had a scandal. So, I'm on TikTok, so I've, made some content, dealing with, Torah and hermeneutics and just even, how do you treat these things? But if it's not that, it's going to be something else. So, I think you kind of have to deal with the circles you run in.
People don't read the scriptures.
Oh, well, yeah, that's the big thing.
They read the Bible, but they're not reading.
They read to affirm the commentary or the favorite celebrity pastor on YouTube. Yeah.
I'm sorry. What were you just saying, Ken?
I said people are not reading scriptures for knowledge sake. They get their daily, you might read, okay, I'll read Matthew this day. We get my verse. Tomorrow's verse might be from Luke. Now I'm going to go over to Genesis. You don't get good theology. You also don't get New Testament interpreting the Old. You don't get whatever the topic happens to be that everybody's floating after. Many people just go right on because they're not deep in the scriptures to know how to counter it. It's all emotional.
It seems to me that kind of where the movement might be stagnant at. The real way to only kind of get people spurred forward is them examining the love that we would exhibit, of course, with one another, and the unity within those nuanced differences.
Mm-hmm.
But also just preach and teach New Covenant theology as if you're just doing what you would do. And those deeper thinkers, they'll ask the deeper questions. Yep. And the regular churchgoers they'll just, hopefully you'll be helping them out,
Yeah, and that's what I try to do. I help teach Sunday school at my school, and when we're going through, what does the Bible say about, even the Trinity, or sanctification, baptism, whatever else, I try to really look at whole passages and show oh, this is the progression of Christ to whatever this thing is, or this thing to Christ, and center it around there, and just almost try to teach people how to read the Bible as I go through it. Same thing for Bible studies, and I think all teachers are sometimes wondering, gosh, I feel like I already said this. But, and sometimes I have great conversations where there's a woman at my church whose friend is it's sort of in a Torah observant, a Hebrew roots group, but she's questioning things, and so her husband and I have been talking about it, and just how does she even want to approach this issue? But ultimately, if the only time that it's addressed is when you're specifically addressing Hebrew roots, well, you're playing catch up. Whereas if every time you're teaching on something, or you're reading your own Bible, you're preparing yourself to deal with the word and get familiarity there, well, then whether it's Torah observants or Presbyterians or atheists saying how can you condemn this sin while you're eating bacon, it should all be similar.
Point at old Jesus. It's old Christ.
So what you seem to be, let's perhaps think of then maybe joining those couple of different perspectives. What Curtis and you were saying is that men like yourself who are who are in churches that are not NCT, you can do your labor there, and maybe something will spring from that. Maybe you'll go to another church, it'll be similar, but you could blow the NCT trumpet. The angle I'm coming from is I'd love to see you guys who are doing that grafting and that hard work have a support network of some kind, even if it's prayer, even if it's, you know, just that you guys have access to different voices, different opinions within that community, whatever it may be, a theologian, a pastor, a fellow pastor, a prayer chain, whatever. I would just love to see that that network, that community, like exactly as we're doing right now, but much more rich, deeper, involving East Coast, West Coast, and including some of the big names. Instead of everything be shotgun and everybody everywhere, which makes it harder for guys like you to blow that NCT trumpet, if you get what I'm saying. Because it surely is great to know that you're being supported in prayer by an NCT network, surely.
Absolutely.
So Angus, what you're envisioning is basically a national New Covenant Theology organization.
No, not an organization, just
informal.
Informal. I recognize NCT as, yes, as Ken would say, it's an informal body of believers, but at this moment it's not so much a body, it's like this.
We're all starving alone.
Yes, yes, we are all kind of off on our own in our own desert islands, and
I'll tell you
I
what.
understand that. I understand, and there's strength in that, because it means they're independent and they're not being controlled by the man. Nevertheless, there is surely the various